Welcome back to another episode of A Better Way of Earning. I am your host, Dr. Michelle S. Thomas. And there was a time when access to information was limited. Today, it is constant. News, social media, opinions, expert analysis, contradicting viewpoints. At any given moment, you can find multiple perspectives on the same situation. And while that level of access should create clarity, for many people, it's doing the opposite. It's creating confusion, hesitation, and in many cases, fear. Today, we're going to talk about something that is quietly impacting how people earn, decide, and move in today's world. Today's topic: how to navigate fear in an environment filled with information. Let's start with what's happening internally. When the brain is exposed to too much conflicting information, it begins to experience something called cognitive overload. And when that happens, the brain is programmed to look for relief. Oftentimes, that relief comes in one of three ways. One, avoidance. I'm just going to ignore everything. Two, dependence. I'll just follow what others are doing. And three, reactivity. I need to act quickly before something happens. All three reduce independent decision making. And this is where something deeper begins to happen. People begin to trust themselves less, not because they're incapable, but because they are completely overwhelmed. Let's really dive into what happens when there's a loss of self trust. When individuals are constantly exposed to conflicting opinions, emotional messaging, urgent headlines, they begin to question what is actually true. What should I do? Am I making the right decision? And over time, this leads to decision fatigue, which makes it easier to follow instead of deciding. What I found in the travels and the interviews and the work that I've done is this decision fatigue actually rolls into isolation, not isolating per se physically from people, but you begin to hide the fact that you are overwhelmed, that you are tired, that you no longer really have the strength to make these decisions. Because in society, that's a negative stigma, right? So when you begin to feel this decision fatigue and cognitive overload, the next stage is to hide that, which drills us deeper into emotional and mental unwellness because we don't want to talk to people about it. This is why this episode is so important for me to get out there, because I want one, if anyone's experiencing this, I want you to understand that there's nothing wrong with you. Let's start there. Even the strongest people become overloaded. Even the smartest people experience decision fatigue. And it's because we are over inundated with excess information. Some of this information is designed to help us learn and improve. Some of this information is created for distractions. Social media platforms, in the beginning, begin to study human behavior. whether we knew it or not, the information that we plug into our social media is directly used for their machine learning to figure out what content, what advertisement, what sells to their subscribers. And this, let me put a pin here because depending on when you're listening to this episode, we recently just had, I think it was on the 21st or something of April, like this whole big conspiracy thing went out that discussed that you had to put this disclaimer on your Facebook account because Facebook was going public and that was going to allow them to take all of your photos and all your personal information and use it in any manner possible. Here at A Better Way of Earning, our role is to dive through the headlines, get rid of the myths, and give you the clarity of the true information. This is not true. Facebook going public has nothing to do with your public information. When you signed up for your Facebook account, there was this extremely long agreement that most people never read. But this agreement spelled out what they used your data for and what they were able to use your data for and what they could not use your data for. And when you scrolled all the way through, because let's be honest, a lot of people just hit that bar all the way down to the bottom and click that acknowledgement so that you can move on to the fun stuff. Well, within this very long acknowledgement, what it states clearly on all of these social media platforms is the information, that the data that they gather from their accounts is used to train the algorithms and the AI systems for their platforms to maximize their revenue. Has nothing about people digging into your business or whatever. It is literally training the AI models to know what you like, what keeps you on that platform, what causes you to continue to scroll, so that they then can transfer that information over to the advertisers. Because even though your profile on these platforms is absolutely free, someone has to pay for all this. All of the new bells and whistles and perks and things that's going on with your social media platforms, someone's paying for it. And who pays for that? Advertisers. Whether it is the small business people that are launching ads on the platform or multi-million-dollar companies that use these social platforms to promote, sell, and bring awareness to their products and services. Either way, this is not this data isn't being farmed so that they can take your grandbaby's pictures or something and put it out there on some inappropriate site. They have far too many things to do than to do that. What this is doing is it allows them to attract more advertisers and more companies because going public has allowed them, obviously, if they're going public, it's because of the profitability, and that is allowing them to grow all of the data sets that they currently have. So I just want to clear that up. I'm posting some notice on your page that says that Facebook is not allowed to use your personal photos for public information doesn't change anything. It was all done. And if you haven't created a Facebook account and you're about to create one, or any social account or any platform, I would encourage you to take the time out to read those agreements before you sign. The more you know, the better off that you are. How does this tie into being overwhelmed, cognitively overloaded, or frozen with your decision making? When social media first started, years within, again, they created machine learning to figure out ways to keep people engaged on the platform. It started out as a great engagement process that soon turned into a very controversial human experiment, is the best way to explain it. What they were not prepared for was the obsession that it caused in a lot of people to sit on these platforms 5, 6, 12, 15, 17 hours a day scrolling. How does this happen? Because the algorithm continues to put on your feed everything that you are completely interested in. You've taught it what you like. You've taught it what's going to get you to not only read or engage with, but what's going to get you to respond and comment on. And whether that's controversial, whether it is something adorable, whatever that cue is, the machine learning knows about it. And that's what they keep on your feed. So it requires for the human side of you to become more disciplined. And it's a lot harder than anyone wants to admit. Because again, a lot of times there are things that we don't want to discuss that we hide because we don't want people to view us in a certain way. My crutch wasn't social media. I I'm on social media, my businesses are on social media, but I knew early on that it wasn't something that would keep me interested. I'm a researcher, so kittens and puppies and all of the other stuff that people were talking about wasn't going to keep me engaged. However, I am a gamer. Shocking, huh? I'm a gamer. And so for me, I would download these games, and they were always mind challenging type of games. It just wasn't something just for me to do to pass time. It was actually a challenge for me. I remember I didn't even know until my sister pointed out. I think my first game that I became kind of, obsessed with was Candy Crush right in the beginning when it was first launched. And I didn't know, I thought it was just pretty normal that the levels that I had mastered and gotten to, that the app would then run out of levels. So I would have to wait a week or two, or sometimes longer, for them to develop more stages to the platform. Again, I thought that was normal. I didn't know. I didn't know until I was having this conversation with my sister and several other people, and they're like, "What level are you on?" "Oh, I'm on 700 this or whatever the number was. I can't remember now. It's so long ago." But it's because it engaged in how my mind worked. It continued to build a unique challenge for me to conquer, for lack of better terms. Well, throughout the years, I found different games, different types of engagement. I knew exactly what I would want to do that would keep my mind challenged. And let me just explain this. I didn't play video games because I was bored or whatever. I played video games because it would preoccupy my mind enough at night that I could drift off and go to sleep. I'm a thinker. It's a great attribute, but it is not the best attribute for someone who is a very nocturnal person. So it will be hard for me to go to sleep because my mind would always be thinking about each company, each assignment, each thing that needed to be done, each challenge, whatever broke down, whatever didn't break down, what needed to be done in the future. And eventually I would just think myself out of sleep. So video games was my way to distract my mind. Some people put notepads beside the bed and they write everything that they're thinking down on a notepad. For me, don't judge it. A notepad beside my bed, I could write a journal a night. So that was not a solution for me because writing it down required for me to turn a light on, stimulate my mind, write this down or jot this down, um, and then that would then spiral off into other thoughts. Back to the point. Although the machine learning tools that social media used early on to predict human behavior and what needed to be done to keep people engaged on the platform, later on in years, the gaming companies learned the same tool. That's why there are ads on a lot of these games to get you to download yet another one, yet another one, yet another one. And even though I wasn't one that kind of got caught up in the social media scroll process, I did get caught up in the gaming process where there were new challenges for me. I say all that because going back to the whole concept that most people who haven't experienced this feel like that is not real. Some of the most logical people, because this is the study of human behavior, some of the most logical, disciplined people can still get caught in this web. The more of an expert or the more that you're out there and you have this view or persona that you want people to look at you at, the higher that is, the least likely that you are to go and tell someone that you're struggling with this cognitive overload or that you are now feeling like you have decision fatigue. You'll talk about it at work because it's something related to work. But in your personal life, it's very rare for someone to seek help because internally we feel like that it's a failure of us and we should know better or do better. These are things that we've scolded our kids about or cautioned our kids. And then you find yourself as an adult either binge watching TV, watching streaming services on social platforms, playing video games, avoiding a lot of things that are critical in your day to day life because you're exhausted. Why does this matter? Especially when it comes down to earning. This cycle doesn't just affect how people think, it also affects how they move. We see it in delayed career decisions, which means that generation after generation, people are less apt. The younger generations are less apt to commit to long term careers because they don't want to make that decision right now. I want to figure out who I am. I want to travel more. I want to live life. I want to do something before I get locked down into something. And not to say that that's a bad thing, that's a great way to look at it. But when it comes down to delaying career decisions, it may adversely affect your ability to get into said careers or your ability to build the lifestyle that you want with delaying getting into a stable work environment. We also see it in hesitation to pursue opportunities. There's that debate on I'm comfortable where I am. This is working for me. What if I go out there and try to find a different job or try to find a different career or start something new and it falls apart? Then I've given up something that I already know, or in some people's language, I give up the devil that I know for something that's completely unknown. Why is this happening? Because we're tired of making decisions. We see it in how people are reacting to trends instead of building strategy. For a lot of people that are marketing their businesses on social media, especially when you're marketing, social media becomes your only marketing tool. What you'll find is a lot of the posts, a lot of the flyers, a lot of marketing and advertising, they begin to look alike. Like everybody almost says the same words, they use the same templates, they use the same thing because they look and they saw that someone else got a response. So I'm going to carbon copy this, even though it may not align with who my brand is or who I am. I need people to focus and it to capture people's attention. So I'm just going to rinse and repeat. That is what is called reacting to trends. If the trend is shorts, if the trend is static posts, if the trends is this design, people are more apt to just jump on that than to sit down and figure out what strategically works for their brand, their outcome, and their business. And finally, we see it in relationships. We've already talked about jobs. We can even go into apartments or living in situations, etc., where people are so exhausted with decisions. They are staying in situations, good or bad, longer than necessary. Fear doesn't always look like panic. Sometimes it can look like pause. Let's really dive into the reality of it. There are some people out there that have a stack, maybe 2 or 3 stacks of bills that, looking at the outside of that envelope or the email that comes in, you know exactly who it's coming from. You choose just not to open it because right now you don't have the money. Right now there's something else that's pressing. I don't want to deal with it. Now, logic says it doesn't go away, it doesn't change anything. It's not a great thing, but we are overloaded, my friends, right now. Let's think about some practical tools to bring things back into your control. Tool number one, you've heard it before, but we're going to explain it with a new twist. Limit the information intake intentionally. So people say they give them an alarm, they set times, they only allow themselves to get on social or watch TV or do whatever in controlled environments. Well, here's what happens with your brain and how your brain navigates things. It's the same thing as crash dieting, right? Nobody ever ties TV and dieting together, but this is what happens. If you have become accustomed that your escape plan from living life or making decisions or making hard decisions, let's say your escape plan is TV or has been TV, binge watching movies. And if you, again, back to the whole creation of forming human behavior, even your streaming apps now no longer wait for you to choose another movie or another show to watch. If you let it play long enough, it will roll into the show, not that you choose, but the show that they want you to watch based off of your watch history. Now, there's a little bit of controversy with that. We won't dive too deeply into that, but what I've learned is that algorithm is a little skewed because they're really pushing movies and shows that they've received marketing and advertising dollars for to get people to watch because again that grows that trend or whatever. But the premise is still the same. You have created this space and time to avoid decisions or dealing with conflict or dealing with hard topics and things by binge watching movies. It's easier now because as long as the TV isn't on sleep mode, it will play and play and play without you ever having to touch that remote unless you have a timer on it. When you try to go cold turkey, like what's suggested commonly across the board of limit your information intake or limit your time on TV, limit your time with marketing media. It is just like any other habit that you form. It cannot be sustained unless it is replaced by a healthier behavior. So you can click that TV off all you want to and jump back into work or paperwork or opening up those ominous envelopes or emails that you were trying to avoid. But that's not where your brain will focus. You will skim through, you will rush through just so that you can get back to what made you feel good, because we function off of our dopamine feel. And that's what these things do. They stimulate dopamine, which gives us a temporary euphoric feeling. And just like any other addiction, the activation of that dopamine throughout time has to take more and more for you to get back to that same euphoric feeling. My healthy way for me to reframe what people tell you to do when it says limit information intake intentionally is do this in stages, because the worst thing to do, especially with someone who is already overloaded, who's already mentally exhausted, is to abruptly take away something that keeps you partially connected, engaged, feeling okay, to strip all that away and expect you to be able to navigate in a emotional, social, or mental safe zone. If you are going to limit your movie intake, whether it's to a certain day or a certain time or whatever, then for the other hours that you have become accustomed to watching those movies, what will you do? Are you going to replace that with exercise? Are you going to replace that with social engagement, maybe getting outside of the house? But you have to replace it with another dopamine injection so that your body will not feel depleted. Because a depleted body on top of an overwhelmed body can lead into very unhealthy behaviors. While understanding not all information deserves your attention, within that process, strategically treat it as a plan. Choose specific sources that you are going to limit your information to. Choose specific times to consume information. This can reduce being overwhelmed. But in that same process, also choose what is going to fill in that gap. And oftentimes, when you are already overloaded and you're already stressed, which causes you to pause, the expectation that you can fill that with work and productivity sometimes leaves us feeling empty, dissatisfied, and frustrated. So find something new, find something, maybe something you used to like to do, and now you're going to try it again. But find something else that is going to give you the similar feeling with that dopamine injection and feeling good, and begin to peel back that time, not abruptly start. Hopefully that helps. Tool number 2, create a personal decision framework. Now, this is very healthy. If you create a framework that you begin to teach your brain how to not only understand, appreciate, but follow, this will help with those empty feelings, those empty spaces, those urges. Again, when you first stop watching movies and TV, or in my case, it was stop playing video games. I deleted them all off the phone and I was like, I'm not going to do it anymore. During those empty times that I was used to grabbing my phone and playing that video game, became very frustrating for me because my brain wanted me to do something. I wanted to do something and I didn't have anything to replace it with. So, learning that from a neuroscience standpoint, I began to fill those empty spaces with other things that could occupy my mind, get me to not overthink and get a good night's sleep. But tool number two, that personal decision framework. Before making decisions, ask, does this align with my goals? Is this based on fact or emotion? And finally, what outcome am I trying to create? This builds internal structure. Back to, you're overwhelmed, you're frozen, everything's on pause. You taught yourself to fill this with scrolls or other levels of entertainment and things just to just keep your mind preoccupied. Creating this framework, and you're always asking yourself these questions, will help you to better understand what you want to engage your time in, when, and how much information you're going to bring into yourself. And then tool number three, which is so key and important to wrap this up with, rebuild self trust through small decisions. Confidence doesn't come from one big move, it comes from consistently making small, intentional decisions. The more you act with awareness, the more your confidence grows. This is for anyone across the board. If you were always a decision maker and you were always the one that was carrying the load of all of the information and decisions, sometimes it's not about overload. Sometimes you're just tired. You get to a stage in life that this is not what I want to do anymore. Well, instead of just completely cutting off that aspect of your life, begin to take control of the decisions of small actions. What am I going to do today? Control your calendar. And some of these things, I know some people are listening and thinking, oh, well, these are simple things. Not to everyone, it's not. I remember listening to my pastor's wife talk about her personal calendar and how she would block off time for herself and her kids and her husband. And everybody knew that that was her time. And back when I heard this, I was the people pleaser, grinder outer type of person, right? I was always on the go. And even though it was a very simple step or something, I really struggled to feel like that I could get the people around me to understand that. Why? Because we teach people how to receive us. But not only that, that was a part of my identity, right? So for a lot of parents, we call it empty nester syndrome or whatever, retirees, for people who've done the same career for 20, 30 years, when that time in that space is over, there's a period of loss. Like, what do I do now? Where do I go now? How do I feel this space? What I want to do is, before you get into that emptiness, before you get into just giving up on being who you are and doing the things that you have done, I want us to become aware of what can accelerate that feeling. And information overload is the biggest catalyst. Unfortunately, your information overload is what makes majority of the biggest companies around the world profitable. So it's not going to be up to them to pull back. They're only going to get more. They're only going to deliver more. Each platform is going to give you more and more and more and more because they understand human behavior. You, my friends, have to build in your own framework of what will work for you. And this goes back to the previous episode, the last week's episode that we talked about your personal brand. This is not a one and done circumstance. There are going to be evolutions in even this process. You may have more time or less time. You may have more interest or less interest. There may be things that may just completely organic happen where you no longer seek out this information. But every time you feel a shift, every time you feel a evolution in your decision making process, then you need to adjust the framework so that you do not fall into decision fatigue or experience bouts of cognitive overload. And this is not something just to get listeners or whatever. This is real. There are some people out there that have been overloaded with so many various aspects of information, opinions, misstated facts that they don't know which way to turn now. They don't know what to trust. And when you get into a space that you have isolated, you distrust the information, and you are not comfortable with asking for help in this space, your mental well being is what struggles and suffers the most. And we don't want to do that. In reflection, I want you to ask yourself, am I making decisions based on clarity, or am I reacting to the loudest voice around me? Because those two paths lead into different outcomes. Fear is nothing new, but the volume of information shaping it is. And in a world where information is constant, clarity becomes one of the most valuable assets you can develop. As we close today's conversation, remember this: earning is not just about opportunity, it's about the decisions you make in response to what you see, hear, and experience. And those decisions are strongest when they are grounded in awareness and not overwhelmed. If you want to continue building that clarity, you can find us across the A Better Way of Earning ecosystem through the podcast, deeper insights within the Job Hunt Chronicles, and by exploring opportunities through Ascent Global Marketplace. Because the goal is not just to stay informed, it's to stay clear. Until next time, stay grounded, stay intentional, and most importantly, stay in ownership of your choice.